2020 has been arguably the most unpredictable year in recent history, and that has affected the world in multiple ways. When it comes to basketball, the NBA had to finish its season inside a special campus. Many questions remain regarding the future of the league. Still, even while such uncertainty would be enough to discourage most people from making large investments, it wasn't enough to stop one of the most important transactions in recent years from taking place. Just a few days ago, it was announced that the Utah Jazz ownership had reached an agreement to sell the team to local billionaire Ryan Smith. And while the move took most people by surprise, it could end up being one of the best things to happen to the franchise since its previous sale. Welcome to Courtside. We're taking a look at the Jazz's new owner and how he might help the franchise reach new levels of success. Ryan Smith may not be the most well-known name in the world of sports. In fact, most people living outside of Utah may not have heard too much about him before. Still, in a few months, he should become one of the most influential decision-makers in the NBA. So we'll start by letting you know a little more about him. Smith, an entrepreneur, was a student at Brigham Young University in his early 20s before deciding to start a software company in 2002, along with his father, brother, and one of his former college roommates. As the years went by, his company based in Provo, Utah, kept on growing until it was bought in 2018 for $8 billion, making him and his partners one of the latest stories of successful entrepreneurship in the tech world. Still, while one could assume that a tech enthusiast wouldn't be too related to sports, that couldn't be further from the truth when it comes to Smith. As a kid, he grew up watching Jazz games and played for their junior Jazz with the hope of eventually making it to the NBA. And while that dream didn't come true, he still found ways to get involved with his local team as the years went by. His company became one of the team's partners in 2017 when the league introduced its jersey sponsorship program. However, instead of placing his brand on the Jazz's jersey, Smith decided to promote a philanthropic cause that invites people to donate money in the fight against cancer. At the moment, it was considered a strange strategy. Still, the program has raised over $25 million and remains as the lone cause-related patch deal in the NBA. And aside from showing his philanthropic side, the businessman took the opportunity to get to know former team owner Gail Miller. As the years went by, the relationship between Smith and Miller family grew closer, and he approached them multiple times with the proposal of buying the franchise. Eventually, the Millers felt he would be the right candidate to succeed them. And so, the transaction was announced on October 28th. The deal is pending approval by the league's Board of Governors, but assuming it will be completed, the move will make Smith the third tech billionaire to become the majority owner of an NBA franchise following Mark Cuban and Steve Ballmer. At age 42, it would also make him the league's youngest governor, along with Memphis Grizzlies owner Robert Pera, who's 42 years old as well. Still, even despite his successful background, the announcement came as a shock to fans and media reporters in Utah. After all, the Miller family had owned the team for 35 years, and it didn't look like they were close to selling it anytime soon. But since the death of Larry Miller, the rest of the members of his family slowly became less involved with Jazz management. In fact, Gail put the franchise into a legacy trust in 2017 in an attempt to make sure no one would try to relocate it in the future. Therefore, no one was expecting her to look for a successor yet. Still, Smith made her and her family feel confident that he would take the Jazz to the next level without ever attempting to move the team out of the state. But even for him, surpassing what the Millers did for the team may not be an easy task to do. Back in 1985, Larry Miller became Utah's unsung hero after acquiring part of the team's ownership. But why was this so important? At the moment, the team wasn't performing well financially, and its majority owner, Sam Battistanet, had been seeking to relocate it. In the following year, the Jazz performed better from a business standpoint, but still, Battistanet was approached by people who were looking to buy the team and move it to a different market, and he could have bought out Miller if he refused to sell it. But despite being in an unfavorable position, Larry was not willing to sell the team, so he decided to make a risky inversion and bought Sam's share, thus becoming Utah's majority owner. Under his leadership, whether the team would remain in Utah was never a question. However, the most impressive thing of his tenure was how the Jazz transformed itself into one of the winningest franchises in the league. In the years that came after the sale, the Jazz accumulated one of the best winning percentages in the league, second only to the San Antonio Spurs. On top of that, they achieved 16 50-win seasons and won 9 division titles and 2 Western Conference championships. And while they have not always been considered contenders, the Jazz missed the playoffs in only 8 of the 35 seasons in which the Millers had control of the team. In other words, Larry and his family turned what had been one of the most mediocre teams in the league into one of the most steady and successful organizations. And they did it in a small market where few star players have ever voluntarily come to play. But now that a new owner is on his way, let's take a look at the areas where the Jazz can improve. As currently billed, Utah has one of the most talented starting lineups in the league. They have the services of 2 current All-Stars in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, a point guard that was as close as possible to being an All-Star in Mike Conley, and an excellent scoring threat in Bojan Bogdanovic. With all that talent, the team was expected to take a leap forward last season and challenge the top squads in the Western Conference come playoff time. However, as play began, the Jazz was only slightly better than average. Therefore, They were forced to acquire Jordan Clarkson in the early stages of the season. Clarkson quickly developed a good rhythm with his new team by providing scoring off the bench, something that helped the team play much better. However, Utah never looked like a real threat for teams like the Lakers or Clippers throughout the regular season, and their record during the seeding games seemed to indicate they would have a quick exit in the postseason. But then the playoffs came around, and Mitchell played at a level that few players have ever reached before. His performance almost helped the team upset the Denver Nuggets in the first round, but in the end, the Jazz would come a three-pointer short of advancing to the second round. The way the series ended was frustrating for fans in Utah. At first, no one thought they could defeat Denver, but they quickly took a 3-1 lead and had a chance to finish the Nuggets during Game 5. That, along with Donovan scoring, made them look like a potential threat in the West for a few games. However, things went wrong, and ultimately, they lost the series in Game 7. Still, as hard as the defeat was in itself, the Clippers' collapse during their series against the Nuggets was even harder to bear, given that many people wondered whether the Jazz could have been the ones to reach the conference finals. That, of course, is something we can't be sure about, but still the fact this team looks like it's capable of having such a run is something that should have management looking for a way to improve the roster. Utah is already good enough to make playoff appearances and win at least a series every year. However, whether they have what it takes to have a deep playoff run remains to be seen, and that's where Smith comes in. Since making it to the finals in the late 90s, the Jazz has been unable to put together a roster that can be considered elite. However, a new owner might be what the team needed to take the next step forward. To put things into perspective, we can take a look at the Dallas Mavericks. Before Mark Cuban acquired the franchise, the Mavericks were one of the worst teams in the league. However, following Cuban's arrival, Dallas enjoyed its most successful run ever, which culminated with a championship in 2011. And while some could say their win in the finals had a lot to do with a poor performance from their opponent, that run was only possible because everyone, from Cuban down to the bench players, was on the same page. Now, the Jazz doesn't need to make such a radical turnaround. As we've already mentioned, they're already a good team that's looking to become a great team. And while there's not an easy way to do that, Smith might be more willing to take risks than the Millers were. And in the following months, he could have a chance to prove it if that would be the case. While he won't be the team's official owner until later in the year, we can't assume he'll take part in some way in the decisions the team will make once the offseason gets going. And a crucial decision the team will soon have to make is how much it will spend to retain its players. The team can offer both Mitchell and Gobert an extension when the offseason begins. However, Gobert is eligible for a supermax extension that would put the team in a difficult financial position in the coming years. So the first question it will be facing is how much it'll be willing to offer its star center. If the Jazz fails to reach an agreement, the team may believe he won't return after next season, and if that happens, will it be willing to trade him? Then what about Conley? He had a difficult first season with the Jazz, but he's owed a lot of money next season. Would Utah be willing to part ways with some of its most talented players if it could receive a superstar in return who could form an elite duo with Mitchell? Those are just some of the questions Smith could face going forward. And while it's unlikely his team makes any drastic changes this offseason, there'll be more difficult choices to make in the future. If he's willing to take more risks than what the Millers did before him, Utah could make a return to the finals in a few years. But only time will tell where he takes his team. All in all, despite the uncertainty that's currently surrounding the league, things could be a lot better in Utah in a few years. With Mitchell taking another step forward in his development, it might only be a matter of time before he turns into a superstar, and that's enough to be excited about the Jazz's future. However, whether the team turns into a championship contender or not will depend on more things than just that. If Smith gets as involved in basketball decisions as Cuban has, most decisions will go through him. And if he's able to make most of them right, things could become very interesting in Salt Lake City. But now, what are your thoughts about the Jazz's new owner? Will he be able to lead the team to a championship in the future? Let us know in the comments. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to like it and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. We are Courtside.